I also wanted to note, Darlene, that Tracy Mitchell called and will be joining us about 15 minutes late.
Okay, thank you.
And you're live.
Okay, thank you. Welcome everyone to the February 18th special board meeting. Can we please have the secretary call the roll?
President Mason,
Present.
Vice President Lasane. You're muted, Pam.
Present.
Thank you. Director Berg,
Present.
Director Nichols,
Present.
Director Mitchell. Thank you.
Thank you. And we can go ahead and adopt the agenda by general consent unless Dr. Salzman, would you like to say a few words about this evening's presentations?
Thank you, Madam Chair, board, and to our public. Tonight, our agenda contains a segment for the board to review and approve the new strategic plan framework, which we're all very excited about for everybody to hear. And the board will also receive an update on the technology plan, which is perfect timing as we're in our continuing of remote world and hopefully having some light at the end of the tunnel to continue moving forward. So I'm excited for everybody to hear the presentations this evening.
Great, thank you. So our first item is our strategic progress monitoring, and that is the overview of, or the strategic plan framework. And I'm going to hand it over to Mr. Gunn to kick it off.
All right, thank you. Good evening. While we get the present, thank you. That's very nice. It looks great. Tonight, our primary objective for the strategic plan framework agenda item is to ask for board approval of the framework for the new strategic plan, which includes priority student outcomes and strategic themes. Martha Greenway with Greenway Strategy Group will present the material and facilitate the conversation, and I, of course, will be present and available during the discussions as needed. We have brought discussion and presentation items to the board, I think 3 times over the last 4 or 5 months on the strategic plan. So while the board is very familiar with it, just a brief review for some of the listeners that may not be that familiar with it, is that this is the first time in 10 years that we will have gone into a process to update or replace our strategic plan. We have completed the analysis phase, which is the first of 3 phases. We are well into the second phase, which is strategy development. And by April, we will be in the third and final phase, which is the action planning phase. We should be done with that by June and be ready for implementation. On January 12th, we presented to you the draft framework and outlined the process we would be undertaking over the next month leading up to tonight to seek input and feedback on the draft framework. Tonight, you will hear about that process, and you will also hear how we've used that input and feedback to validate the framework, as well as make some slight adjustments to the framework for your consideration tonight. So with that, I will ask Martha Greenway to proceed with the presentation.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you, board members. I appreciate the opportunity to share with you this evening. So as Mike already referenced, the project has been organized into these 3 phases. We've completed the phase 1 analysis, and we are now in the midst of the strategy development. So tonight we will be sharing with the board some recommended adjustments to the priority outcomes and strategic themes based on stakeholder input. And then we will be moving immediately into our next step of drafting the objectives, initiatives, and measures. And this will be followed by the action planning phase. Just as a reminder about some of the language we'll be using, the vision is the desired impact and why the organization exists, and the mission is the descriptive statement of its purpose. We have tested the vision and mission of Everett Public Schools as part of this process, and I'll just say at the start right here, we have heard nothing that gives us reason to suggest that those be modified. So we won't be presenting a lot of feedback on those this evening. The priority student outcomes represent the specific measurable results to achieve for students toward which the rest of the strategic plan will be directed. And then the strategic themes represent those areas of district work that have to be addressed, that need to be enhanced, improved, or designed in order to achieve those priority outcomes. We're then going to move into strategic objectives, which state specifically what about those strategic themes need to be addressed and represent the choices about how best to influence the district work. And then finally, we'll get into the strategic initiatives, which are the specific projects, and the action plans, which will lay out how those projects will happen. One of the things that we find is that people always want to jump and start talking about the strategic initiatives, their ideas about what work needs to happen. And so I do want to comment that in our feedback sessions that we just conducted, we actually picked up a lot of people's ideas about what they think needs to be done. And those have been captured and will be shared as we move forward into this next phase. So just to reflect on how we got to where we are tonight, in September and November, we did a deep analysis of student success indicators. We looked at all of the district's numerous and extensive previous surveys and stakeholder input, and we also looked at data on comparable districts. We then conducted stakeholder interviews and focus groups about district assets and improvement opportunities, and launched a new community survey where we gave people an opportunity to rate the extent of their agreement with the district assets and improvement opportunities that emerged in this prior work. In December, an internal design team looked at all of this information and drafted the priority student outcomes and strategic themes, which were shared with the board in January. And then we took those out through January and February for stakeholder feedback to ensure that we were on the right track before moving forward. And so this is what we tested. This is the current district mission. These were the priority student outcomes that we tested. And these were the strategic themes. One of the things that we clearly heard was there needed to be an emphasis on equity. And so the notion of equity, cultural awareness, and responsive practices has been shown as integrated into each of the strategic themes. In our experience, when equity, cultural awareness, and responsive practices are treated as standalone, one-time, isolated projects or events, they do not change the systematic practice of the school district. And so as we move into our next step of identifying those objectives and initiatives, we will make sure that these are threaded throughout everything the district does. So the priority student outcomes emerge from the district's data about the areas of student success where the district has the best opportunity to leverage outcomes in the future. And again, the strategic themes emerged in looking at the district's assets and opportunities and the highest leverage places where district practice could be refined to address those priority student outcomes. So these were the sessions that were held for stakeholder feedback on this draft framework. And so you can see the sessions that were held, the number of people that participated, and then these were the discussion questions that people were asked to provide input to. I am next going to review some general response to these discussion questions summarized across these stakeholder engagement sessions. And then I do have some thoughts about enhancements that we might make to the framework before going forward.
Martha, could I interrupt for just a minute and ask for a definition of President's Council?
Mike,
When it-
you want this one?
Sure, I can. The President's Council are the union presidents. So the bargaining groups, their unions, the leaders of their unions meet with our management staff on a regular basis. So this is that group.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
So in regard to what works well about the strategic plan framework, you'll see here that I've made a slight distinction between things that were mentioned in the Let's Connect and the PTSA meetings, which were largely attended by parents, versus those that were mentioned by the President's Council or the administrators and supervisors, which are employees. And so you'll see that both groups essentially had general support for all the strategic themes. They like the fact that equity is embedded throughout the framework. And they also really like the fact that community engagement is specifically called out as a strategic theme. Additionally, employees like the fact that it's clear and concise and coherent. It's on one page, it's easily summarized. They also like the fact that it was focused towards students and the entire plan would be driven towards student achievement. It's data-driven. You'll notice that these ideas are in larger thought quotes because there were more responses around those items, but there were also fewer but still some consensus responses around the fact that implementing this plan is going to require shared work across the district, the emphasis on early literacy, specifically that third grade literacy outcome, the instructional focus, and that it addresses achievement gaps. So when we asked about, is there anything that you disagree with? The most frequent response was nothing. So that's a good sign. Parents talked about wanting to ensure that as the plan is implemented, there is support for students who choose to go directly into a career rather than college, and making sure that that holistic emphasis on post-graduation opportunities is embedded. Also, if you recall, when we presented the survey results, the students had lower ratings of agreement with most of the items. So I want to make very clear that it wasn't that they thought things were problems. They were just less likely to agree that certain things were assets and more likely to agree that certain things were improvement opportunities. So there's an interest in understanding, is it actually the case that students' perception is not as positive in others? And if so, why? And what do we need to do to address that? Parents also want to ensure that when the outcomes are actually measured and tracked, that we look beyond metrics that are reliant solely on the Smarter Balance assessment scores. And then employees mentioned a concern that while they are positive about the notion that equity is embedded across the strategic themes, they want to make sure that by having it everywhere, it doesn't end up meaning it's not really anywhere. And so wanting to be sure that it is indeed directly addressed and is in the forefront of the work. When we asked what is missing, you can see here that there's one large thought box, which is shared by everyone, which is student mental health and social emotional learning. So people did not feel that the language around student ownership of learning was strong enough and that it didn't reflect the need for direct attention on mental health and social emotional learning. In some smaller thought boxes were some other ideas. Again, the specific actions on equity and diversity needed to be ensured that those were going to be included. Parents thought that perhaps innovation and student love of learning as opposed to student ownership of learning were important concepts to call out more directly. And then you can see there's kind of a smattering of things that employees discussed: early education, school safety, special education, community partnerships, technology, and the need to ensure that as the plan is implemented, that there is district-wide collaboration, which means not only central office collaborating across departments, but that schools and central office collaborating collectively. I want to make one comment about school safety. This is something that wherever we go, school safety always comes up. We did not see any data about Everett Public Schools that indicates that your schools are not safe or that people perceive that they're not safe. But it's sort of like when you get on an airplane and somebody says, what's important to you? Well, top of mind is, I want to make sure this airplane's safe. And so people want to make sure that schools are safe, but I want to be clear that we did not see any data or information that implied that this was currently a deficit or an issue. And so what I'm going to do next is kind of talk about how we recommend that this input be addressed, particularly the input about things people have concerns about or view as missing. So as I mentioned earlier, many of the ideas that emerge are really not about the framework, the outcomes for focus and the strategic themes within which to change district practice, but they're instead about what are we going to do about it. And so this top box are things that we believe we can ensure are addressed in the strategic plan implementation. The technology, the district-wide collaboration, the actions on equity and diversity, the innovation, the achievement metrics beyond SBA scores, and the support for students going directly into career as well as into college. Some of those things land more squarely in one of the strategic themes. And so as we move forward and we have teams working to build out initiatives, we will make sure they get this specific direction. So under effective instructional practices, we want to make sure that this early education notion, particularly support for students pre-kindergarten and special education, are considered in their work. In this area of consistency and accountability for key processes affecting students' success, we just want to be sure that there are common and consistent processes and policies and procedures around school safety. And then within community engagement, we want to ensure that community partnerships are specifically called out. There is one adjustment that we are making to the strategic plan framework. So of everything we heard, the majority of it, as I just reviewed, can be addressed in this next step where we determine the initiatives and think about implementation. But we do believe that this concept of student mental health and social emotional learning is perhaps not as clearly called out as it needs to be based on our stakeholder feedback. So the notion of student love of learning and also this need to understand and address why students seem to have some more negative impression than other stakeholders about the district, we'd like to boil all those together into a revised strategic theme A. So change that language from what we had, which was student engagement and ownership of learning, to a supportive culture where each student is engaged, thrives, and values learning. So we feel like this really puts the onus on the district to create the culture, the mechanisms, the opportunities for students where they are engaged in learning, but they're also thriving. They're thriving mentally, they're thriving social, emotionally, and they're thriving academically, and that they value learning. So it's not just that they're doing things because they feel like they're important, but they also actually value it and appreciate it for what it's going to bring to them and its inherent value and importance to their future. So with that, I'm just going to present again the overall framework for the board's consideration. So once again, we see no reason to adjust the current mission statement. I'm not going to put the vision statement up, but we also think that the vision statement is on track and still very relevant. So the priority student outcomes would be to ensure third grade literacy, increase science achievement, increase math achievement, reduce gaps in achievement among student groups, ensure students are prepared to succeed in college and career, and strengthen student wellness, engagement, and safety. And the strategic themes through which this work will happen, where the objectives and initiatives will be defined that will drive district practice toward these outcomes. Strategic theme A is the only thing that's changed here. So the supportive culture where each student is engaged, thrives, and values learning. Effective instructional practices, equitable access to resources to support student learning. So ensuring that all students are provided the same opportunity regardless of classroom or school. Consistency and accountability for key processes affecting student success balanced with differentiation and innovation. So I like to refer to this as being clear about what we're going to hold tight and what we're going to let loose. And for those things we're going to hold tight, be very clear about the processes and how those are going to be monitored and how people will be held accountable, while fostering differentiation and innovation to respond to student and community interest and needs. Strategic theme E, community engagement, and strategic theme F, human capital recruitment, development, and retention. And of course, ensuring that as we do all of that work, equity, cultural awareness, and responsive practices are embedded. I do want to make one more comment before I turn it back to the board for questions and comments. And that is that this strategic plan framework does represent a transition from the kind of conceptual basis, if you will, for the district's previous strategic plan that has been in place for the last 10 years. The current strategic plan, which I just referred to as the previous strategic plan, has really had an emphasis on operational excellence. And you all have achieved that. So you are at a point where the operational practices of the district are really not coming up as problematic areas. And so I would like to just comment that by focusing this strategic plan on priority student outcomes, it really ensures that now we're looking at refining work that aligns specifically towards student success. But that prior effort that the district has made to have processes of continuous improvement, looking at performance metrics within the operational areas, that work still needs to continue. So while this strategic plan is implemented, the existing practice around continuous improvement and monitoring of operational work does need to continue because it has led you to a place of excellence in your district. And so with that, I just want to share where we're going from here. So we are tonight refining the strategic plan framework based on stakeholder input. Starting almost immediately, we'll be training strategy teams that will be organized around each of the 6 strategic themes. They will each have a coach from our consulting group. We will use tested protocols for them to work through to develop the objectives and measures and initiatives within each strategic theme. When we move into action planning in April, there will be an effort that the superintendent will undertake with the leadership to phase in those initiatives. If they are of the proper magnitude, they can't possibly all be implemented at once. So really think carefully about the proper cadence for rolling those out. And then for those that would launch first, we would be laying out the detailed action plans. So what are the work plans in terms of tasks? Who's responsible? What's the timeline? What are the budget and resource requirements? And also, how are we going to ensure ongoing stakeholder feedback so there's a continuous feedback loop with stakeholders as the strategic plan is implemented? And then lastly, we will work with the district to develop a monitoring process, both metrics around the outcomes and objectives, but also methods to track the strategic initiatives and have accountability to ensure that the work of the plan is actually being implemented. And so with that, I will turn it back to Mike or to the board chair to address any questions or comments.
And so the, I guess my final request is just that the board consider approving the new strategic plan framework. And as Martha said, we're here to answer any questions you might have.
Well, thank you, Martha, for a great presentation here and all the details. I appreciate seeing the input from all the different groups and your thoughtfulness to sort of readjust. I'm going to start with questions tonight because I have one that I keep seeing come through, and I'm wondering, this is a district-wide strategic plan, and so the focus obviously is on student learning and student outcomes, but it encapsulates everyone who's in the district. And as all the information and the conversation that I'm seeing about social and emotional learning and mental health is focused on students. And I'm wondering if there was any further conversation about the adults in our district, because we're coming out of a very difficult time, period in history, whatever you want to call it, where I think social, emotional, and mental health is really, across the board with everyone, students and adults. And I noticed, so for example, on the priority student outcomes, it strengthens student wellness, engagement, and safety. And then on slide 10, you talk about student mental health and social emotional learning from input from outside stakeholders. Was there discussion about a broader sort of net of mental health and social emotional awareness?
So if I will respond to that, and then I'm glad to ask Dr. Saltzman or Mike to weigh in. There was not direct comment about the strategic plan framework needing to address health and wellness of employees. That does not mean, in my mind, that should not be included in the strategic plan. And so what I would say in response to your comment is that we can carry forth and ensure that strategic theme 6, which is the human capital recruitment, development, and retention. That also, in order to do that, some strategic initiative around health, wellness, and whatever language would be appropriate to use for employees. To me, that is where I would like to see that plug in. Because the logic of the framework here is that the outcomes are what we want for our students. The strategic themes are what the grown-ups in the system need to do in order to make that happen. And so what I'm hearing you say, which you indicated you've heard from others, is that in order for the grown-ups in the system to make that happen, they also have to be cared for, and their mental health and feelings of safety have to be paramount. And I think that can fall under strategic theme F as an initiative item is my response to that.
Yeah, if I could just weigh in, because of what we just endured in our nation the past year, it could fall right in there, right? Because it's going to be ongoing next year for our adults and kids. So as we have that with F, it's that human capital recruitment and health and well-being, development and retention. So it's in there because the strategic plan will drive the work for the next 5 to 10 years, right? And we're going to always need social emotional learning for everybody, but especially coming out of this world that I just can't even put into words. As we go back next year, and as we are now, the adults need that. But as we plan for next year, because this plan will go into in place July 1 as we start the fiscal year. So I think that'd be great, Martha. Madam Chair Mason and anybody else that wants to, add that. But I think it's a good place to put it, especially coming out of COVID.
Yeah, I think in particular this year, but really an ongoing, systems kind of process. I think kind of very similar that if all of us don't eat and get good sleep, none of us are very good learners. And I think that goes for all ages, at least for me.
And the other thing I just want to throw in here also is that, there've been a number of areas of unrest and concern in our country over the last year. And so these issues of equity, cultural awareness, that's part of the reason that has to touch all areas, because we also have to be very mindful of how that's affecting our employees and what our culture is like for our employees around those issues. So it is also the stress and the social emotional wellness, but it's also being attentive to cultural awareness and equitable practices for employees as well as for students.
I would kind of agree with what Caroline is saying as well, because our greatest resources is the staff that work for us. And I like the idea of, even though we put human capital recruitment, I think we do want to include wellness for our staff and our administrators, because without them, we can't function as a school district. So I do like to include the fact that is one of, our strategic theme items in ensuring that they understand that their well-being is very vital and important to us.
So just for clarification, are you actually suggesting we add that word to strategic theme F?
Well, you had made a suggestion of that it was that it would come under strategic theme F. Could you repeat that?
Yes, and I also want to clarify, it's not either or, right? But my thought was that we would direct the team working on strategic theme F to ensure that there is a strategic initiative directed toward employee wellness in all of the arenas that we just discussed. And so that I think that we can make happen. I was just clarifying whether we also wanted to make a wording change to the language.
I like the word in the sentence, because without the focus in that it is there and that it is important to us, we tend to omit that and it could be glassed over. I like the focus of having it show up in our strategic plan, that it is important and vital to our existence, and that's important to us.
would the word be wellness that you would recommend or suggest?
I do like that, wellness is a very important issue, and I do like that. Because when you start looking at human capital recruitment, development, and retention, your focus, that to me is focusing in on a staff. And so I believe wellness is very vital.
So we,
Mike, your lips are moving, but I don't hear any words coming out of your mouth.
yeah, I'm not muted, I don't think. I've just been listening, trying to be a good listener. I think we absolutely could put the word wellness in either just before or just after development, probably after development. So it would, theme F, strategic theme F, looking to the others to chime in as well, but we could have it read human capital recruitment, development, wellness, and retention. And then it would explicitly state that in the title of the theme.
May I just ask, because we don't specifically call out social emotional for the kids. I mean, we say supportive culture. We have a couple other words, but we don't specifically call it out for the students. I'm not disagreeing. I'm just asking why we need to explicitly put it, or implicitly, whatever the right word is, for the staff when we don't have it implicitly or explicitly stated for the students.
Can we also take down the presentation so we can see each other and engage?
Andrew or April, do you want to sort of weigh in on some thoughts about that?
Yeah, I was just going to weigh into what Tracy said, is that if we're going to call it out for staff, which I think is fine, we should just maybe call it out for students as well. But also it could go back to our mission, because I think much as equity is weaved into every single part of it, I think wellness and having healthy, happy, socially and emotionally, whole students and staff is one of our cornerstones. It's what we do. So if there was a way to put it in there so it's just kind of woven in, that might be a better option.
Yeah, I think it is basically germane to development and retention, right? So you want this to be a place where people love to come to work, and part of that is providing them the resources that they need to be well, and all having a good work-life balance, all those things. And if we're asking folks to help us emotionally and mentally, academically develop our children, we need to be investing the same in them. But I do like that this strategic theme is more focused on the students. So kind of calling out the wellness and well-being within that one-page framework of the employees, to me, seems a little redundant. I'm not opposed to it, but it just seems a little kind of unnecessary. That was my thought on it.
Might I make a suggestion? One thought was, given that, and sorry to cut you off, Pam, I'll give you everyone an opportunity to say further, but you took the feedback from the different groups that provided input and spent some time thinking about it and made a recommendation on theme A. And I'm wondering if, given this input that you're hearing, that I guess I just don't want to start wordsmithing tonight, like where should one word go in this whole chart? And so I also understand that you want to get approval.
Yeah, I think if in my professional opinion, I will just say it is important to resist the temptation to try to string every important concept into the strategic theme language, because then it gets so weighty that it's very difficult to kind of understand the main intent. But certainly if something's critical to the board, we would be open to it. I do think that a strong strategic initiative focused specifically in this area will address what's important. And I also do think that that the language that is here development is a very broad word, and I think it could be the notion of development of wellness and well-being for employees can definitely be incorporated within that notion of development. So
What if we just said holistic development?
Well, I look also on the priority student outcomes, and there it does say strengthen student wellness, engagement, and safety. So on that same slide, for priority of student outcomes, it lists that, but we don't list wellness in a specific sense for our staff, our teachers. And I don't think adding the one word wellness after development is going to detract, as well as say one thing for one and not the other, because wellness is listed under priority student outcomes.
I had input that was like not on this specific one, but just on the overall strategic plan. Is this a good time for that?
Let's wrap this topic up and then we'll move on. Do you have thoughts about adding the word wellness? I'm leaning towards leaving strategic theme F as written, given that the word development and retention are, fairly broad words. They can encapsulate a lot, and then providing a strategic initiative, I think if I get that correctly, that's very specific, similar to under strategic theme A, what we did with students.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, I agree too. And
Director Berg, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, that works for me too.
And especially because it says over there, it's priority student outcomes is strengthen student wellness, engagement, and safety. It's a different thing than a strategic theme. They do sit in different boxes. So maybe that sort of helps that.
I mean, I think either way, it wouldn't hurt. I mean, I think it's because I feel like retention and wellness are kind of the same, right? We're trying to retain staff, but I think putting it there to Pam's point, I think that does make it really specific. And I think which is a good thing because it's also something we tend to forget.
Well, and is this something that's going to go back and be retested? So that if we add it here, that maybe we get staff input if it's needed, or if a strategic, initiative is enough.
I think after tonight, we're planning to begin right away to meet and train the strategy teams to begin the research on the approved themes.
And so can I ask if Debbie, as being HR director, if does it need to be specifically called out, or will it be impressive on the staff that if we do add it, do you think that'll be the staff will really appreciate that?
I think that the strategic theme as stated is good, and we would take the feedback that the board has provided us. Mike, particularly, who's facilitating the different work groups, where that could come up and be a part of the initiative that comes out of that work, as Martha had indicated.
Thank you for that.
And we will be bringing information about the initiatives and the cadence of them, the schedule, when we're going to proceed with which ones. Those will be coming forward here in just a couple months to you.
Might interrupt. It also, Martha and Mike, if you could just let the board know in transparent mode how many teams we have, because I know you start embarking on this work to our everybody. What do we have? I know we have a lot of teams being trained tomorrow. Is that correct?
Right, there are 6 teams, 1 per strategic theme. Each includes 8 to 10 people. And the other thing I will mention is that during the strategic initiative development process, there is opportunity for stakeholder input. So as that strategic initiative is crafted, there would be an opportunity for employees to weigh in and provide input about it. And so it's not that the group would be working in a vacuum either. But that would be the next step, is that the team would be trained. They would have this input in from the board, and then they would test ideas with administrators and others in the district before finalizing the initiatives.
And what's so rich and organic is the team that will be trained. It's not us. It's a lot of informal leaders within the system. So it's a really an organic and transparent strategic plan.
Okay. If we don't have any more questions or comments on this topic, I know Director Berg had wanted to speak as well.
Yeah, just in general on the strategic plan. So first off, I really like it. It's really easy, it's accessible, and it seems like you did get a lot of good stakeholder input. And I think I go back and forth with the equity being baked in versus called out, because I do think it's important to bake it into each of these. But I saw on one of the slides that there was a concern that it gets forgotten if it's kind of implicit in everything. And so that's just something to be cognizant of. The one thing I did want to mention, and I don't know how far down the planning we've gotten as a board in this, but I've had the privilege to sit on another board that went through a process very similar to this. And one of the things that we came out from it was that each director took one of the themes as kind of their wheelhouse. And they were much different themes. It was a much different time. But for instance, like teaching and learning was one of the themes. And then we also had one on like pre-K and early ed and things like that, that basically each director was able to kind of move forward in a community fashion. So we had community groups set up on the ongoing basis to review those strategic principles. And one of the things when I was reviewing some of that stakeholder data that you provided, it seemed like the community really wants more input. They want to make sure these aren't forgotten, that this exercise isn't done and kind of packed away and not really organically growing and moving with the community, but also making sure it's not forgotten. So that could be a way to figure out what our involvement is as directors are with this strategy as it moves forward into the community. So I'm just putting that out there because I know some of us have passions in certain areas, and that might be something to think about as we move forward.
Yeah, that's interesting. April, am I interrupting?
No, you're good.
Okay, I just have one quick question, Martha, about the PTA statement about our making sure that we do have that filter of career at college graduation. My concern really is that definition of career versus job, and making sure that we are putting kids and that parents understand that we want jobs that will lead to career. But as much as you can work at Target in high school, I feel sad when that's a career is the clerk your target. And it is sort of, some people it's right for, but it is, how do we help kids become the manager at Target?
Yeah, I appreciate that. And one thing that I will also comment on is that at the first thing these strategy teams are going to do within each of their strategic themes is in-depth research about what are the most effective ways to leverage district practice in this area. And that becomes the basis for the strategic initiatives. So this can include things that the district has implemented that are proving effective. It can be things that other school districts are implementing to be effective. It can also be things from the literature or things that might even have been implemented in other related sectors. But this area of college and career success, and particularly developing students' capacity in high demand, high pay career fields, is one where there is a lot of national research. And so just know that they'll be tapping into that, because the risk here is what we don't want to end up with is creating a dual system, right? Like when I was in high school, people left the building and were all day in a career program that had very low expectations and really weren't preparing them for success in life. We don't want to revert to a culture of low expectations and putting kids on a path that doesn't lead to productive futures. But just be aware that exercise of having to go through the research and actually pin their initiatives to proven effective practices is part of the discipline of the process.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And it'd be interesting too to see how do our different programs that we're looking at for career, straight to career, if you can get in, become an MA, become a nursing assistant, so you're on your path to a career, that it's not pigeonholing, it really is giving opportunity for maybe not all high-paying jobs, but livable wages and a worthwhile career.
And also, as you mentioned out, I do want to note that not all strategic initiatives are brand new baked ideas that the district has never done before. One of the things that we often find is that there's latent success in the district already. It just hasn't been properly resourced or scaled or not available for all students. And so some initiatives come back and it's really about leveraging some things that you're already doing. I'm not necessarily saying this might be one of those, but I do want to just take the opportunity to make that point too.
Thank you.
I think that's a really good point. Thank you.
I had one more question, if I may. For so long, early education has been one of the focus areas as far as our outcomes goes. Now I see we're going to address it in theme B as effective instructional practices versus an priority outcome, because we are looking at ensuring third grade literacy, but a lot of that deals with early education, even earlier than third grade. So my question is that a switch from where we were looking at before, or is it something that we're still focusing on and it could be an initiative now instead of an outcome? So that's my question. I don't know.
Well, I think you answered it. It's the latter. And I think what this is really saying is that the outcome that the district has the opportunity to leverage here is ensuring all students can master literacy by third grade. But we don't have students show up in third grade and then start teaching them to read. So the strategic initiative really needs to be about what is all the work we need to do as a district to ensure that all students reach that point. And so the work around early learning would be one of the strategic initiatives under effective instruction. That would be the place where that work would continue and be enhanced.
Even before, when our early learning went further back, I mean, that's one reason why we have transitional kindergarten. That's why we have ECAP programs. That's why we do birth to 3, all those early learning things. So our focus would still stay within the initiative as that, and the ensuring third grade literacy is more focused on just the outcome of those early learning initiatives?
That is correct. And
Okay.
I also want to make clear, as we measure, we'll be looking at some interim outcomes as well. If you want to think about it, these are kind of the benchmark things that at the end of the day, we want to see accomplished. So yes, that is conceptually the way that this is designed.
Thank you.
And one thing I just wanted to comment on, just based on what Director Mitchell was saying, and I think, and we probably are getting too much in the weeds, but I know that, it's hard. It's a cashier job at Target's a good job, right? Like that's in a cashier job at a lot of our grocery stores are really, really good union paying jobs in those senses. And so I want to, when we dive into this whole career versus college thing, I think as a district, we've always leaned towards like what we feel like, what we've established as a good career mode, where I talk to parents every day, all day, who just want their kids to get a job. And that would be awesome if we as a district could just, making sure that as we go down this path, we acknowledge that any jobs our kids can have where they can be socially, emotionally fulfilled and working and providing for themselves and potentially even a young family is a positive outcome. And so just, I don't know what the right way is to word that, but just making sure that we just super, affirm all of those types of jobs, because we have so many of our parents who are cashiers and other really good jobs out there that I would see as a success.
Yeah, no, April, I appreciate that because it is sometimes just a poor choice of words and
No
I
worries.
meant no malice.
No worries. I just know right now those are our essential workers. I want to make sure they know that I am just like, yes.
Yeah.
And I think that also speaks to, so was really happy to see that both parents and employees called out the mental health aspects, and I'm really biased towards this because that's what I do. And I really like that. I like the way that the first strategic theme was reworded and reworked. So it's very happy to see that, because, as much as all these other things matter, at the end of the day, we have our hands on these kids for 8 to 10 hours a day, depending on what's going on. And I don't care if they graduate and they can tell me what year the Magna Carta was signed. I care that they graduate and that they're good whole people. They're good whole citizens. So to me, that's the kind of the fundamental why I'm excited about this strategic theme work being student focused and bringing in that focus on mental health and social emotional learning. So that's my main comment. My only other criticism, if you were, is I'm firmly in the Oxford comma camp. So maybe I'm just really old school that way, but it always throws me when I don't see it. So not a deal breaker for me, just something I'll throw out there.
Okay. Are there any final comments or questions? Hearing none, I think at this point we would like they're looking for board approval of the new strategic plan framework, given all the input that we've provided tonight. So I'd like to call for a motion to approve the strategic plan framework.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the strategic plan framework. Will we now move to a vote, or is there any further discussion? Hearing none, we will move to a vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say no. The strategic plan framework is approved. Thank you again, Martha, for joining us tonight. Excellent presentation and really great feedback and discussion. And thank you, Mike, as well.
You're welcome, and thank you all.
Thank you, Martha.
Yeah, and Caroline, just a point of clarification, when I'm looking at the agenda, was that really an action item that we had to vote on? Because I didn't know we could vote in special meetings.
It was an action item to be voted on.
Okay, sorry.
It was also put out in the meeting notice and in the communications that we would be taking action on something this evening.
Thank you. I just want to make sure.
Yeah, I worked with superintendent staff to make sure that was taken care of and addressed before the meeting. So
Thank
good
you.
question.
Just want to clarify.
Yeah, good question. And thank you for the clarification, Mike. Okay, at this time, we are going to move on to our work study session, and that is our integrated technology plan update. I think we have several individuals, as usual, joining us to provide information on different aspects of the technology plan. And I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Brian Beckley to kick us off.
Good evening, directors. We are excited to be with you tonight to talk about the integrated technology plan. And we have been with you during regular board meetings every year since 2016 with status updates on the progress of the plan. And tonight we get to join you for this special board meeting to not only provide you some updates, but to engage with you in some discussion on the plan and our vision for the future of the integrated technology plan. The integrated technology plan intentionally expanded its reach to all layers of Everett Public Schools, including its operations, as reflected in where we see the plan as part of the 5 strategic priorities. In our time with you this evening, we are going to go ahead and advance the slide, Joanne. In our time with you this evening, we're going to briefly look at the plans designed to trace the origin of its goals and strategies, highlight how the plan up to March 2020 helped us pivot to remote learning, and how the experiences since then have helped us appreciate the path the 2016 levy put us on, and share what we are learning and how it informs the plan's next iteration and needs for the next levy. Joining us tonight are two of our high school technology leads to tell their story and provide examples from the classroom. You're going to hear about the plan tonight and how it is anchored to the 4 pillars. Ensuring innovative technologies for staff and students is essential in creating an equitable, accessible, and sustainable system. We're going to explore the different ways technology expands climate considerations and the work being done to build a culture that supports a growth mindset of adults and students alike. And looking ahead to shifting from deployment of technology to enhanced instruction. So I want to start with just a brief look back to the origins of the plan before we move forward. And it really started back in 2014 when this board kicked off the current technology initiative with your approval of 3,400 Chromebooks dedicated to the Smarter Balanced Assessment online testing. The impact of that approval meant a few things. First of all, school assessment windows could be tightened. Wi-Fi enhancements were made so testing could be anywhere on campus. And the staff had access outside of the testing windows to these mobile carts that could be used within their rooms rather than waiting for the computer lab. The result of that decision and the additional technology and the standards aligned instruction ended up being improved student performance on the SBA through the coordination of our academics, assessment, and technology departments. The appetite for technology only grew. The cycle for both a new technology plan and the timing of the 2016 technology levy aligned with the forward thinking of this board to support a one-to-one proposal. And that was a very important decision point and visionary. The plan's designers used the National Education Technology Plan as a foundation to build from as its centerpiece with the interconnectedness of our enhancements and instructional goals. And that work really started in earnest. So with that plan as a model, the designers took a deep dive into the work of Project Red, and that was a research study that we read together about one-to-one programs that had measurable gains in student engagement and performance. The plan that we developed evolved from a levy proposal to designs to a series of goals supported by priority strategies. And the strategies were drafted from a review of research into successful and unsuccessful one-to-one programs. And this board, the central office leadership, the Teachers Association, our school leaders, Technology Advisory Council, community, planned revisions to their priorities and clarified those goals. And that shared investment in authoring the plan helped with the buy-in for key stakeholders. And so what we ended up with and our annual review of these goals has reaffirmed the importance of these 6 key goal areas. And tonight we're going to make visible not only how our initial focus on infrastructure served as a foundation for the sudden shift to remote learning, but also how remote learning has taught us more about the other goal areas. And while we believe this board's forward thinking and investment in a one-to-one program has definitely benefited us, we also recognize that we need further growth in our capacity to fully realize the greater impact on the classroom. And finally, we will see the need to create the next iteration of the plan and how that will be aligned to a capital levy will for an investment in sustaining the climate we've established and advancing that shift where organizational-wide technologies just transform and inspire. So we want to pause, and we had a couple of prompts here. First of all, I love this picture. This was deployment day at Cascade a couple of years ago, and the excitement on these girls' faces in the Cascade Library as we were rolling this out to our Cascade students, the smiles on their face, just really looking forward to the possibilities of what we were able to provide them. So I think highlighting the prompt on this is asking you to think about a highlight, an opportunity to kind of discuss and share a highlight that you are particularly proud of. So I've talked a little bit, but you've also experienced in the last few years a highlight of the plan and our technology integration. And then the next prompt, Joanna, if you want to go to the next one, and to think about, so kind of be thinking about a highlight, but also in looking to the future. So we're going to share some information here that might help prompt your thinking moving forward. We'll come back to this question again at the end, but if there's something now you want to, that you want to see as a shift that about our use of technology moving forward. So kind of thinking about both of those, we'll take down the presentation so we can engage a little bit. So a highlight and something you'd like to see either continue or when we come back from remote learning to include, to make sure we sustain.
Well, I might steal everybody's thunder, but I think because of our one-to-one and our quick deployment, we didn't miss hardly a beat, I think, with the last March. And so I want to thank Brian, you, and everyone that we were able to seamlessly go, not without hiccups, to this. And then all the presentations we've had since this started, a lot of those best practices that we've heard that are happening in the classrooms in this virtual area that could possibly transition back to the classroom, I think is what I'd most like to see, is what can be moved back into the classroom for that student engagement using the current technology. So sorry if I'm sure there's other things we're proud of.
Thank you. Yeah, sustaining what we have now and continuing it into the return to the classroom.
Certainly that, along with the deployment of hotspots, when we have technological deserts and divides based on socioeconomic status where people don't have access to the type of internet they need, the staff being really responsive in that regard and very proactive in getting those hotspots out is something I'm particularly proud of. One thing I would like to see going forward, and I'm sure it's already in the works, is using this technology so that students who say have chronic illness of some sort that are not in class most often are still able to engage in the class, that we're changing fundamentally the way we're learning and the way we're teaching, and that we're able to reach more folks more effectively within that. So
thank you.
I would say one of the things that I'm particularly proud of was last year, in this, in March timeframe when we had to close, we were handing out devices at the CRC and at different schools, and parents just had to come by and stop. And I happened to be there one day at the CRC and seeing parents pick up their devices with their students so that they can continue learning. We had a pandemic, something that we've never experienced before, and yet we were able to go to a different type of delivery system so that education would continue. That is one of the things that I'm truly, truly proud of. We were one of the first to jump right in there, along with giving meals and lunches out to our students. It wasn't as if we stopped and waited months and months to get back online. We were ready to assist them. The other thing going forward, I would like to agree with what has already been said, as being able to continue this device, continue to have our teachers develop their own websites and becoming engaged in technology as if, that's just the way we do things here. And making it clear for parents to come on board and see what their kids are doing, and their kids to be engaged if they cannot go back into the classroom. But, that parent university is very valuable. And it's a way in which we can assist the parents in getting their what resources are necessary to their students, because not all kids and not all parents had the technology, had the capability beforehand. Maybe the kids did, but maybe their parents did not. But we were quick to provide that resources for them. We need to continue that going forward.
Yeah, and my highlight is kind of from the before times, I guess is the best way to put it. And it was being able for 2 years in a row to be at Jackson at 6 a.m. for both parent or for a student picture day, but also for giving out laptops. And that first year, that really early slot, they reserved for Running Start students. And I had this aha moment of these students who were participating in Running Start on a college campus who didn't have a device to use. And we were providing that for them. So it was really meaningful. The kids loved it. I think that first year we gave out t-shirts, and it was just a really big, fun thing, not knowing what now it's a necessity. But the cool thing is, having experienced that now this year, when I had one of my girls had to pick up their device, and I wasn't physically able to go with them. It was in a car. It was really, really easy. It was seamless. Talking to my husband and my daughter about it, it seemed like it was just like it was when I was there in the before times. But it made me think of jumping from the highlight to what I would like to see. To Director Lisenza's point, is that we need to make this accessible, keep making it accessible so that parents can still access technology, access their kids' classrooms, access, being interactive with the schools. And specifically, I'm thinking about parent-teacher night, because again, that's something that maybe some of our parents can't physically get to, but this year they had 100% online option. And it probably felt good to be able to participate with their kids' teachers in that online format. So hopefully we can keep thinking and changing like that so that we can increase participation.
Thank you. Good points.
And I would just say what I'm most proud about is that I guess as a parent, prior to the pandemic, there was a lot of variation of technology use in our district. And, there were some teachers that were really embracing it, and there were a lot of teachers that frankly weren't, in terms of just really, when I learned about the 4 levels of, and I think we're going to touch on those later, of technology use, I saw a lot of teachers and staff using the technology in really basic ways. And that was just from a home front standpoint. And so now what this pandemic and the rollout of the one-to-one devices has really created is a district now that everyone knows how to use the technology. And of course, there's lots of opportunity to grow and learn further, but it sort of forced the issue. And so I think that's something that we're definitely going to take forward. A couple other things, I definitely agree with Director Nichols. I see opportunities for the students that aren't comfortable coming into a conventional high school or medically can't, that we will be able to serve them better now, hopefully. And then the whole system that you've been enduring this past year, where we have a help desk now that knows, the systems are just stronger and more robust than they were before, to be able to respond to technological needs, whether it's equipment failure or training or parent training, teacher training, whatever it is. We have so many more resources and systems in place to address that. So I look forward to carrying all of that forward. That was a lot, right?
Great. No, that's great. Thank you. So did everybody get a chance to share?
I believe so.
You heard from everyone. I appreciate the input and the voice in the highlights and the looking forward. And we'll come back to this later on in the presentation and see if there's any additional thoughts that come to mind of something about care that you'd like to see carrying forward in the next in our next iteration and when we come back to in-person instruction. So as Joanne brings the presentation back up, I'll have her take it from here.
Thank you. I have to tell you, I'm actually moved by hearing your comments because of how well informed you are deeply about the work we have done. And I'm proud to be a member of Everett Public Schools. I've been at it for 30 years, and I can't tell you what admiration I have for the people I work with. This community helped us embark on a mission to see that every student would be prepared for a technology-rich future. And I have a graduate and a high school student who are benefiting from that vision. Even before the 2016 levy dollars were spent, or even came in, we anticipated this board approving a one-to-one initiative. And so we were supposed to replace teacher desktops with desktops, and we instead did laptops. And that took many, many meetings. Could you have imagined if we had desktops in March for our teachers? I can't even fathom it. So it was a radical move at the time, but such a necessity now. Flash forward to the present, where it's not every teacher we're trying to give a mobile computer, but that every student has a mobile computer. And as of fall, September 2020, we were at our fully 1-to-1 ratio. We reached it. We met the need in the spring, but we actually met our goal of the 1-to-1 rollout as of this fall. And I'm very proud to be part of that work. As we look to the infrastructure that went into that, as we kind of look back, where we were for March had a lot to do with the plan that we created. We decided that there should be a robust system in place. We didn't just roll out devices quickly. We made sure they could be supported. We had the technical staff to maintain, train, problem solve, both hardware, and we developed a repository of software. Over the last 4 years, we have doubled the number of applications from 50 to 100 to date that we support. With both Chromebooks and more sophisticated Windows devices deployed, we built out our Google for Education and our Microsoft Office 365 suites. So we had collaboration platforms and additional instructional applications in both. We had the help desk system route where appropriate personnel could deal with hardware, software, student data, scheduling, state reporting, instructional tool support or network troubleshooting. It was all in place with this inventory when our staff went home in March. When we look at our plan and we look at our different goal areas, that foundation that primed us for teaching and learning and assessment goals was in place. And as it took root, leveraging technology's power in the classroom accelerated, particularly in the area of assessment, their ability to expand their reach. They onboarded assessment platforms that aligned assessments to targeted instructional resources. With iReady and Language Live as intervention software, all implemented in the first years, we were aligned to the Project Reach recommendation for quality resources for our students. We've added Performance Matters, and as that come online, it starts to be a way in which our students can finally see a profile of their learning. And all of that's possible now because of the levy funded ability to buy that digital toolkit for assessment. And each and every student has that computer they need to be able to leverage, the teachers to leverage that into the system. As Caroline predicted, we are going to talk about SAMR once again. And we have a lot to celebrate, and we know that. The rollout of computers, the enhancement of the infrastructure, the onboarding of new digital tools, but that was only first order change. But it was necessary for us to start our paradigm shift for the deeper impact on student learning, and that is the changing of instructional practice. Public education in my career has favored continuity and comfort of the adults. The unwritten rules for technology for too long have been that computers were for teachers who liked tech or who were adventurous enough to pursue it. The integrated technology plan invested in professional development to try to avoid that in order to empower our users with the tools and really the confidence to use technology in their practice and to shift our culture. Jeff Utek worked with our staff a year before the one-to-one rolled out at their site. We embraced SAMR as a framework to identify when we observed classroom utilization of technology. And we saw those early phases of implementation that they told us about. The experts said what we'd see as teachers became comfortable, they would manage devices, and the first signs we would see in the classroom were substitution. Slowly, we'd see more augmentation, and our early adopters would start modifying. Before March, we saw the early adopters starting to climb the SAMR ladder, but we were also aware we had many staff lacking the confidence to use the tools to even be substituting. So we headed into March and the pandemic hit, and we were forced onto the first rung of that ladder. There was an immediate need to shift, though, from pushing our teachers up the ladder to helping them maintain themselves even just at the substitution level. In my 30-year career, I have never been more proud of this staff and this district because we were ready. We did not miss a day. We pivoted. From Friday afternoon to Monday morning staff reporting to work, we leveraged the resources that the ITP put in place. Instructional staff had their mobile devices. Zoom was already in place, already an Everett specific instance that we could use. Our LITS team did 13 webinars on day one about how to use Canvas, about how to use the website, about how to use Zoom, about how to leverage Google. Our inventory of hotspots got us started providing homes with internet access, and we had already had relationships with our vendors and ordered more immediately so that our supply could keep up with the demand. And we provided that direct family tech support through our help desk web. A colleague of mine was using his email inbox in another district. We were able to route our tickets out to the field to our employees who could provide the most support to our families. Off to a strong start, we were not immune to the technical challenges though. Our robust internal infrastructure was built for on-campus computer use, and our team was put to the test attempting to troubleshoot the at-home network issues. The world was on the internet and every vendor and service was underprepared. Our families faced so many challenges, some beyond our reach, but there were challenges our innovative team could take on. We used our student information system to start testing out a variety of models and schedules as we prepped for the decision to bring our students back. Our technicians have been using booking software so they could set up appointments with the families to stay socially distanced. We addressed the need for a common virtual classroom when our community begged it from us, and Canvas became our central point of entry, totally centrally supported and administrative accessible. Our parents as well could enter that environment. We had 900 teachers sign up for professional development in August. I had 700 in my Canvas Basics class alone. Our pre-March culture of choice around technology has evaporated. Each teacher didn't have the choice but to go to substitution. So many more are accelerating their adult professional learning so that they can move up to augmentation. And we have a wealth of them begging us to help them start to modify as they continue to move forward with their instruction. Tonight, I'm very excited that the ITP's vision saw the need for, after our capital funded facilitator, to continue as a district to invest in our teachers as resources for innovation. So in a peer model, we have a released period for our teachers in math, science, and ELA, in which they invest in their own classroom, building out technology skills to then use as in the field examples with their colleagues. So here tonight to share to you about their work to date are Gail Walters, science teacher at H.M. Jackson High School, and Claire Wombold, math teacher at Cascade High School.
Good evening. Nice to be with you. Can you hear me? Okay, good. Thank you. I was one who was comfortable with the technology. So my students were using the computers in the classroom, but in the classroom, there were a lot of other things that we were doing as well. One of them in a science classroom is collaboration. And oftentimes you would see that as students working around a whiteboard and discussing their ideas and trying to talk together about that. When we moved to our remote environment, whiteboards were not something that they took with them, that they could share together. So I was looking for something that could serve that same purpose and discovered Jamboard. So using Jamboard, students could go into their breakout rooms, they could be sharing the same slide together, and in their conversations, they could be writing on that slide, working together to discuss the ideas and the prompt that I had. That was our first step. Then they started realizing that Jamboard could do so much more than a whiteboard. with Jamboard, you could add your own pictures. You could add videos if you wanted to. You could write, you could draw, you could highlight. So instead of just writing like a usual whiteboard, then they could add more to it. So we were adding features to that. Also with Jamboard, I could see virtually all of the whiteboards at the same time. So I couldn't hear what the students were saying, but I could see what they were doing, and I could watch sticky notes appear. I could watch arrows appear. And I could also use that as a monitoring tool. So if I see, you know, like the bottom slide there, that group had just barely started while others were almost finished. So as they were working, I could go and check in, see if it was a technology problem, see if they were confused about the information, see kind of monitor, see what was going on with them. So it was really a good tool for that. As we got even more comfortable with Jamboard, realized also that I could save the boards and post them to my Canvas site. Students could go back, could use them for review. They could use them when they were creating projects as a reference for that. So the whiteboard that was just in the classroom and would be erased between each period has now become a Jamboard where they can use lots of different media, and I can monitor and they can use it as they're working forward. So that was one of the tools that I've been working with. I had a chance to share it both during one of the LID days and at some Jackson professional development times as well.
All right, good evening, and thank you for hearing my little story tonight. I think I've now correctly shared my screen. Let's see. My apologies.
You have, it looks great.
Perfect, thank you. All my Zoom windows just closed on me. It's just like class time.
I know.
So during my release time, I've been taking a really deep dive into this free math tool called Desmos Activity Builder. And Desmos has been around in our district for at least 5 years. Our great math facilitator, Kathy Trosvig, has been promoting it, but up until last March, myself and every other math teacher in the district, we used it sparingly. It was for special activities or worksheet substitutes, So since March and my release time this year, now I've had the time to learn all of the tools and options available with Desmos Activity Builder, and develop activities in embedding all those great instructional practices that can be directly shared with my departmental teams and my building and across the district. For instance, I've learned this new tool called the computation layer, which allows teachers to basically edit the code behind the scenes. And so it customizes the activity even further than we could before. I can write code that will give students feedback on their input. I can show specific questions or tasks based on a student's selection. I can also customize the tools and activities to fit my own and my class's personality and needs. In the remote setting, students have benefited from Desmos so much because teachers can monitor their work in real time and give them individualized feedback, which is especially valuable with our limited time in Zoom. Now we can extend that feedback to the asynchronous time. Every single Desmos activity that we do is archived. It's archived for me and it's archived for my students. So we've built a digital textbook this year that every student can refer back to. And even though conversations are definitely challenging over Zoom with all the cameras and microphones and personal preferences, Desmos is still allowing students to explore math and play with math in dynamic ways. They're sharing their thinking in a safe space at their own pace, and they're getting immediate or like nearly immediate feedback. And so when we come back to the classroom, I will absolutely continue using Desmos Activity Builder because of its dynamic nature. I can't tell you how much I'm looking forward to that beautiful blend where my classroom conversations and activities are all the more powerful because of the learning that's going to take place on their screens. Not distracted by it, but empowered by it.
Thank you, Claire, so much. So I asked them to share a little bit more about their experience. And so I'm going to ask, Gail, can you share how are you leveraging your time with release to learn the technologies that assist you in more discipline-specific content area?
So I think I was going to take this one. So some of the things that I've learned and my team has learned, so I'm part of a team at Jackson, are definitely getting stronger at Canvas, using the quizzes, the organization of Canvas, helping students with that as well, and using the portfolio. So the students can really monitor and share their learning with their teachers. And then things like Padlet and WeVideo, so they have some creative outlets. Flipgrid, we have our online biology curriculum, STEM scopes, so integrating that with Canvas. So those are some of the things that I had worked on.
Thank you. Claire, where are your opportunities to share and model and peer coach with your colleagues?
Yeah, so I was thinking about, like, besides our fabulous technology team here at Everett Public Schools, Desmos has been so responsive and innovative during this remote time, which means there's a ton of new tools that they've developed and put out. And without my release time, I don't think I would have been able to learn all of these tools as in depth, nor would my colleagues. Because I'm using my time here to learn all of these tools and share that information directly with my department teams. So with these features, I'm not only telling them about the features, I'm able to create activities that are ready to use and share. And even my colleagues who are self-proclaimed, not as technologically inclined, they're able to celebrate successes with Desmos. I think because I've had this role to coach them through it. So in at least our department, and I know it's happening across the other schools, math is accessible, engaging, and equitable across these classes because we're able to learn this new tool together. Yeah.
That's great, thank you. And then I'm going to ask each of you, Gail, I'll ask you to go first. What do you think will be the most important thing for teachers to carry forward when schools fully reopen to in-person learning about integrating technology?
I think somebody had said this earlier about having technology be enhancing the learning, so not stuck to the screen, but because you have the screen, because you have the ability to collaborate, even across periods if you need to, you have the ability to bring in outside speakers, and to have those students that are out for a while and are able to bring those in. I think those are some of the tools that'll be really good. And in terms of, the teachers are able to create things and then they can reuse them as well. So it's not, so using that technology to build upon as opposed to try to recreate each year.
Thank you. Claire?
So I think something that I know I've learned this year and other teachers I know have learned this year is that when we're using technology in the classroom, we're not cheating. We're not giving students the answer, right? We're enhancing, as Gail just said, we're enhancing the education. Conversations are stronger and more meaningful. We're wrestling with ideas rather than rote computations, using a math example. And so, with Desmos in particular, I can't imagine not using it. With regards to our access for students, whether they're in the classroom or away from the classroom for whatever reason. I hope to see teachers in all content areas continuing to use Canvas as a hub for tools, activities, assessments, assignments, whatever it is, with every student having a device, and with seeing how effective that has been as a communication tool for teachers, students, and families. We have to keep embracing the Canvas moving forward as well.
Thank you both so very much.
Thank you, Gail and Claire. I just wanted to do a pause here with the board to see if there's any additional thoughts about some important strategies. Other than what you've already shared, I said we'd come back to this about carrying forward when we reopen schools in the fall. Not that there needs to be, I just wanted to come back and check to see if there was additional thoughts.
So I was looking at this question. I was curious what the definition of sort of strategy was, whether it was just priorities or, I want to say a huge thank you to Gail and Claire for being here tonight. Thank you so much for sharing your experience. Certainly always hearing from educators and students about their experiences is so much more powerful for the board. So thank you for taking your time tonight to be with us. In terms of strategies, I guess I would look for a little more clarification on this question.
It's sort of a follow-up to the instruction. I was thinking instructional strategies based on what we've heard from the teachers and what we've shared so far.
So
if there was any,
I'm going to throw this open the board. I have to be honest, I don't know enough about instructional strategies as a board director to comment on this. So I don't know if any directors have.
It didn't bring up like any strategies per se, but one question that I had that has come up in other online teaching kind of support groups, if you will, that I'm a part of for arts education, is, so our teachers are creating all of this innovative content and all these different platforms. Are they owning their own content that they're creating? Is the school district owning it? What happens if that teacher decides to retire or move on? Does the school district retain that product? And it's probably outside of the scope of here, but that was the one question I had was, these teachers are doing a lot of work and creating a lot of great content. What kind of use agreement do we have with them?
That's a very good question. My other question is, a lot of our policies are changing to mastery-based curriculum, i.e., once they've reached a certain mastery where students can then go ahead and move to the next level, or we would have that next level available for them to take based on their mastery at one particular level. These particular, I guess you would say, curriculum on Desmos and Jamboard, those things are going to be saved. Students in a classroom have the ability to be able to move at their own pace, as well as review things that they may not understand rather well, and can become truly mastery individuals. They can master the individual before the end of the courses even taken place, if we have very students that are very engaged in the subject matter and want to learn more. I look at this as a win-win for the students as well as for the district. But it is true, what happens with this, because it is shared across their departments, what happens if the teachers wish to take what they have created with them? If they were to move to a different state or move to a different area, what happens with what they've created? Will it become the districts, on
Want to
campus?
chime in here real quick and address
Yeah.
those last two questions. They're really good questions. And the short answer is that the content is ours as a district, because these are employees that are compensated for delivering content through district adopted curriculum. So that's the short answer. If there are other things that an individual would want to either password protect or consider intellectual property, we would probably deal with that on an individual basis.
Thank you. And what I heard from this, Joanne, you almost made me cry, thanking your staff, and just, that's what I try to say, like how quickly they did it, and just, but I appreciate, I use the same term that April used earlier, past times. And what I want to see as an important strategy is what does the new normal look like? What do the future times look like? And that we don't revert back and we prevent, because especially when Joanne said, they had to embrace this technology a lot faster than a lot of them even thought they'd have to. How do we not go back to textbooks and pad and paper, except for where it's appropriate? And that we find the new balance, the new normal, embracing this technology, that we don't go 5 steps forward like we have and then 4 steps back.
And I would agree with whatever director has said so far for strategies. I would add one of my own, and it's something I think our district did particularly well as a strategy, is that we put ourselves in our parents' shoes when this all started. And so a couple of things that happened because of that was that we really over communicated, right? We told people everything. It was great because I'm not technology savvy, but I was able to still navigate 100% in this digital world, getting my kids what they needed. The other thing that we did was going to that one platform that Joanne was talking about, going to Canvas. That was huge. Parents have been begging for that since day one of one-to-one technology, because we were, especially in high school, we had 7 different platforms sometimes dealing with kids. So the fact that we listened to parents, put ourselves in their shoes and streamlined it, and took some knots on the head because of it, but I think our teachers are much better for it, because now they can get the PE, the professional development support they need, knowing that it's one platform. So hopefully we continue with that. And then the other thing we did was that parent university, making sure parents really understood the technology that we had available. So I think as we go forward with strategies, the number one thing is to put ourselves in our parents' shoes. Our kids' shoes, definitely students, but parents as well, because they've got to navigate all these different adult platforms. And if they have to do more than one, it's going to be a problem. So I think those were all amazing strategies. And then just a huge thank you to Joanne and Gail and Claire, because just your passion shows. And I just can't believe how blessed we are as a district to have you.
Thank you. So, and thank you, Gail and Claire, for being here, and you're welcome to stay until the end. Appreciate your sharing. We want to spend our last little bit of time with you today to kind of just touch on the vision of going forward. And that's the remainder of our time, and kind of share our vision and wrap things up. And what we learned from the one-to-one initiative to our March closure was that it was complex setting up the infrastructure, but just adopting the tools and doing the infrastructure wasn't enough. What we need to make sure we do, and you've hit on it as directors perfectly, is the mindset that teaching, learning, and assessment efforts need to take root to fully utilize and move up that SAMR ladder. So that idea of blended learning, and if you look at our goals, go to the next slide, Joanne. If you look at our goals moving towards blended learning, we believe our current goals still hold. That move towards a true blended learning, it's already in our plan, but building that out, redefining what blended learning looks like to us as a district, including our stakeholders and how we define what that looks like, is going to be part of that work moving forward. It's in the plan, but what it looks like moving forward is going to be different now based on what we've learned. So briefly touching on the infrastructure and the vision of these goals moving forward. If you look at infrastructure, is that we know moving forward that we need to refresh our computers every 5 years. And so we purchased and used the monies from our levy to do that. We're going to be updating Sequoia's and Everett high schools and our teacher devices this summer. But future levies are going to be needed to continue to update those and continue to update our safety and security measures. So infrastructure is going to need to continue to be a focus moving forward. Outreach, this board made great visionary that this was a priority in the goal area to add this outreach goal. So that needs to continue to be, you know, we've learned to use tools like Zoom. We can extend our reach, as you've shared some examples here, that the internet and our network has expanded beyond just inside the network. Now it's including home. So continue to outreach with some of those tools you see and have mentioned, including also the Let's Connect tool that we're bringing online to continue to build out those. We forged some great partnerships, want to build those out.
As we look at assessment, we now have the digital tools in place, but it's going to be beyond just the staff examining the student profiles. Now's the time to get the students involved. You know, the assessment toolkit will get us going and furthering the staff's understanding about student proficiency. But if we can equip our students to use that information, to collaboratively with the staff map out their learning, it's one of the most powerful ways we can impact student success. Developing our students as consumers of that data and creators of their steps for improvement of talents helps them truly track their growth and understand that learning is a continuum and not a collection of points. As we look at teaching, we look at utilizing the SAMR framework. Within the infrastructure and the device and the digital tools, what we want to do is empower our curriculum directors and facilitators to count on every student having a computer so that they can do, as Claire and Gail are talking about, expand the students' ability to use technology in the classroom. We know it's not just about kids being on computers. It's about guest speakers and virtual field trips and career exploration. And we know that the staff understanding of how technology can personalize learning will take professional development. We want to broaden this base of peer-to-peer opportunities like those afforded to our high school leads. And in addition, we want to make sure that our software is sustainable over time. And all of those will take resources as we continue. But even beyond the teaching is the learning. And no matter what, that's what we're about. Our new strategic plan focuses on our student outcomes. It's our continued ability to grow the digital capacity of our students in personalized learning. The work will be to build shared understanding of how technology can be utilized in the redesign of our programs so that students are truly engaged everywhere and all the time. You know, one-to-one computers have been our starting point, but we need other tools. Virtual reality, simulation software, 3D printing, that's already here, and that's already resources our students are grasping for. In our next plan, we hope to broaden our base of digital tools with their computer and more.
So the last goal area, again, the goal area number one in the plan and its foundation is leadership. And the LITS department will continue to be, we see ourselves as the prioritizing for our organization secure and sustainable practices and keeping an eye on the industry's growth. But as we've seen during this remote learning, as technology lives everywhere, it's integrated in all of our departments. It lives throughout the organization and not just with the technology department. And so in the next plan and moving forward, it's more important than ever that across departments, our leadership is working with each staff member and with each department on building skill and comfort with the digital tools and making sure that as we are so interconnected in our work, that it really is an entire organizational shift and continuing that work moving forward. And our department will continue to take the leadership on those initiatives, but really engaging all of our departments and staff in leading that work will be the vision moving forward. So just to kind of wrap things up, if there was any additional things you wanted to share that resonated with you that you didn't get a chance to share, a thought that came to mind as we were thinking about the vision moving forward, or any questions that still remain that you'd like to share, we just wanted to give you another opportunity to do that as we wrap things up. And just thank you for the time we had with you here today to get a chance to talk a little bit about the plan now and moving forward.
Thank you, Brian and Joanne. My goodness, I think of all the departments, I mean, we've all gone through huge transformations this last year, but certainly yours has been a big lift, and you've just done such a great job. I just want to say thank you so much for all that you've done to be able to get devices to students, to educators. I can't imagine the hours you have put in. And I know that there are many, many other people in our district who have been putting in hours as well. But certainly this is a big transformation.
Yeah.
So
we have a great team.
Yeah, we do. I'm going to ask a couple requests. One is that many years ago, I saw a great short video on the SAMR model. And I think that would be a great thing to throw in the Friday report for our newer directors who may not have had as much familiarity with that, and a refresher for those of us who haven't seen it in a while. It sort of really explained how, you know, the different levels of learning, which I thought was really helpful in understanding sort of what remote, or not remote really, but what learning looks like when we're in a one-to-one device scenario.
Okay.
And then, you know, kind of a fun thing that I looked at in terms of technology, and I'm kind of curious on your thoughts about this, but not really a response needed tonight. But, you know, there's this big push to in classroom technology that allows individuals to be a part of a classroom remotely. And I first saw this technology actually a couple of years ago used at the new Wazoo building in North Everett, where they had the seats in a circle around a device that, you know, pivots to whoever is talking, whether it's the educator or the person responding. And so I would love to understand what that technology looks like, and if it might be applicable in our district, or whether it's at this point financially out of reach, that kind of thing.
Yeah, you're talking about the swivel
Yeah.
device. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's a couple different iterations of that kind of thing,
Yeah.
I think. You're probably much more knowledgeable about that. And then lastly, I would love to know from each of you, just what have been your biggest challenges this past year? Where have the sticking points been? What are things that the board can consider moving forward in terms of funding? And, you know, I don't want to put you on the spot right now if you're not prepared to answer that question, but I would love to better understand that at some point.
Okay.
And,
Brian,
and can we pull the presentation down?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, sorry.
No worries. Thank you.
is it possible, may I ask a couple questions?
Sure.
Absolutely.
Brian, and I do want to stop and say thank you, Claire, and thank you, Gail, for being available today to provide what you've done. It's so great to be able to see what Desmos is doing and Jamboard. We had that opportunity during the instructional review and then during the learning walks, and I think it's fabulous. And I thank you for the time that you have spent in developing these precise instructional, I guess you would call them little curriculum segments. I guess, I don't know what you would call those, but having those available for students, because during this particular time, they can increase their knowledge and go quicker. They can use them to go back and review. It's really wonderful. It came to a head. I think one director knew of somebody at their daughter's college class that needed some more information and was using our, you know, online learning tool to be able to receive that information. So it is truly being used out there. So it's just wonderful that you're doing that. Thank you so very much. My question for you, Brian, is we have wonderful teachers that are doing this, but we do still, and I'm sure we still need professional development to assist those teachers that are finding it difficult to bring technology into the curriculum and use it as a learning tool. what do we need to do to prop up and provide that professional development for those who are finding it difficult? And then my question is, well, what percentage is that? Is it 10%? Is it 2%? What percentage of our teachers need additional professional development to help bring it, not, to use it as a mechanism to transfer information, but use it as a method of focusing in how best to deliver the curriculum?
Well, in addressing the second question first, to come up with a percentage would be a little bit difficult for me to come up with a percentage, but the sustainability of ensuring that our new staff had the professional development with as part of their onboarding professional development. So as we welcome new staff, understanding about SAMR, that's the framework that we use to fully integrate technology. But in our work in looking at the integrated technology plan and the review of the plan and where we're at, it's almost like a 2.0, this idea of what you heard from our high school tech leads, this 2.0 follow-up SAMR PD, but have it be job embedded. And that's really the model that these high school tech leads are doing, that in their content areas, as they become experts in how they are changing their instruction in the classroom, they are imparting that to their content coaches, that this is the next iteration to really bring it to life in the classroom rather than just going to a training. It's making it more job embedded. I really think that's the next phase of the teaching and learning to get that PD. We also have elementary technology leads. We call them trailblazers, that are working with us as well to do the similar model at elementary. And then we have our middle school facilitators still in that model we used to have it in high school, but moving more to the job embedded, which was really part of the plan in our vision on the outset.
And Joanne, I have a question. I was reading an article just earlier today about holograms. Is virtual learning the same as holograms?
Virtual reality simulations, holograms, they're all part, and it's only the beginning of that.
Yeah, I was gonna say my best friend from high school's father was at Stanford when he made it in a magazine. Oh, I forget the name of the magazine, National Geographic, for being the team on the West to invent the hologram. So he had a patent on it. But anyway, I just want to see too, though, Brian, and Joanne, sort of, the career opportunities that are still possible that the levy might need to help pay for that technology. We've got the Microsoft programs, some of those other things, whatever Boeing needs, but what would be technology based that the kids could learn career-wise in our schools that would get them ready for that job, get them ready for that career, that we could bring, but that we'd have to pay for that technology and bring it into our school. I would like to continue to always, make sure that we're up on what is needed. You mentioned augmented reality, holograms, 3D printing. What are those things that really will get the kids to that job or career?
Yeah, including that in the plan for sure moving forward about the career focus, really partnering with our STEM partners and our CTE folks on those connections.
Yeah, and to get it to scale, does it need to be in the capital levy?
And I would just say to Caroline's question, I know if I could just think of it as an encompassing of what the board can do to support the work. I think this board has been out in front in this area for many years, and so continuing to be sort of partners with us. We're in front of you frequently, but supporting of the idea of a future capital levy to build the sustainability. You have the vision, you're asking the right questions, so it is continuing that support moving forward, because you're already there in your understanding of how it can transform learning in our district, and already has to this point.
Yeah, thank you. When we pivoted in March, it wasn't pretty overnight, but certainly having the technology in place was a huge advantage for our district, I believe. Director Burke or Nichols, do you have any comments or questions?
I do. So one of the things I would love to see as we look at that next iteration of technology and planning is how our technology needs relate to our space needs. I think because of the current public health crisis, it has completely redefined not just technologically how we think of education, but also how we think of education space. And you know, the rubber is going to meet the road come September, because we, you know, for all intents and purposes should be back to somewhat normal. I'll use air quotes, but it's going to look different space-wise. And so I think there's going to be real challenges, but also real opportunities. And even as we look at our previous bond ideas and future tech levies and future levies in general, how can those two be married together so that we can reimagine education and the space around it? And I guess where I'm going with it, to be blunt, is maybe we don't need as much space as we used to because of some technological innovations and how we're using technology and blended learning and quite frankly, how much time kiddos might be spending in a traditional classroom versus doing something else. So I'd love to see some conversation around that.
And I'll just end with saying that Brian and Joanne, your team consistently impresses and makes me proud of this district. So very happy with your work. Very glad to have you on our team and look forward to the next iteration of your work and seeing where we go from here. And I also wanted to recognize everybody on this meeting, thanking you for your time and being here late at night. You know, teachers especially have long days with lots of lesson planning, and then they're sitting on a board meeting with us tonight. And everybody, thank you for everybody staying engaged and being here.
Thank you. President Mason, if I could just make special mention, and thank you for all the feedback, and it's been very helpful, but I'd also like to make sure Ken Toyne, our Director of Network Services, and Scott Jenkins, who's the guy in charge of customer and technology services, so that help desk side and the network side, they were here tonight as well and have played an integral part in the planning and the work that you're acknowledging. So thank you to Ken and Scott. They've been awesome.
I noticed them on the call tonight, and sometimes they present, but tonight they did not, but equally as part of the team. So yes. Thank you.
They were in the bullpen.
Ready to pinch it or whatever the term is. So if there's no further questions or comments, I think we might actually come to the end of our special meeting tonight. I'm going to pause for just a moment to make sure that no one else has input, whether Dr. Salzman wants to say something or any directors have.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, to Gail and Claire, thank you so much for being here tonight. And by the way, when you said when we come back, that's heart-filling just to hear those words, when we come back. But thank you so much, especially for someone that just really figured out how to do the Atari Pong. We've come a long way with technology, okay? So a long way. But I want to share real quick why this went well. This went well because this is one department that loves what they do, right? The technology department, they really love what they do. And it just showed everything. Just what we did from March, what you guys accomplished, just handing out those one-on-one devices was amazing. So salutes to your department, Brian, and everybody that's here tonight, the board and the staff. And to the two teachers that presented, you just said it best in this changing world. So when you love your job and you love your department, things get done. So thank you all for being here tonight as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I guess this concludes our special meeting tonight. And I want to thank all of you again for being here with us. Great information, great discussion. And I believe we're back again next Tuesday night for another special meeting. And at that time, we'll have another coronavirus update, re-entry plan update. So thank you and good night.
Good night, everyone.
Bye.
Everybody for coming. I really appreciate it.